Okay, good morning again. Okay, again, this is Krish Radhakrishnan. I want to thank you all for coming here, or people who have joined in the webinar. We want to thank you. We didn't realize it was a Good Friday. Sorry about it. So based on the recent events, we thought it may be a good idea to have a webinar to make sure everybody understands the rules and the requirements and the expectations by the department. Okay, so it's very important. Before we start, let's go around and introduce ourselves.
Yeah, my name is Carl Steenlachmidyal. I'm the person in charge of the enforcement unit.
I'll be Cantor, Specialist Investigator.
Jeff Wong, Specialist Investigator. Louis Wong, Investigator.
Amber Tapakane.
Alan Siriaco from Environmental Maintenance, Investigator.
Alan Friedman, Investigator, Expediter, and General Good Guy.
I'll take you up on the list. So James Robinson, I'm an architect and an investigator.
Jim Braun, Investigator.
Ed Namath, Investigator.
And Recordkeeping investigator. Darren Bryant, TRC Environmental Corporation. Marty Rutstein, academic. Mark Rutstein, environmental consultant.
Ralph Perillo, Investigator.
Bing from Needs Analysis. David Lee, Investigator.
Mark?
Jack Rathgeb, Pure Solutions. Lance Tuckrosky, Clean Air Testing.
From DEP?
Kim Ranko, Inspector.
Steve Camiori.
Ram Ramahan. Adam Schwarzenberg. Roger Straw-Hardenog, Enforcement.
Once again, thank you for coming, and I see some of the old faces, right? There are good people doing excellent work, but then there are also, like, we're trying to tighten the other end of the spectrum here. So so the plan is like Carsten is going to make the presentation. At the end of the presentation, people present here can ask questions, right? And also, we are going to put the presentation and the audio in our DEP website. So you will be able to access, or if need be, we may be able to send the presentation to all of you guys. Okay, so Carsten.
Yeah. So again, what we're going to do is basically give you a presentation on what do we do when we go out and do inspections. What do we look for? What we expect you to be doing, and know when you go out and do your surveys. So this is a basic outline here: situations that require a survey, basic requirements for a field survey, basic requirements for a survey report, record keeping, how do we go about doing audits, point system, hearing for suspension and revocations. And again, as you said, in the end, we'll hold all the questions at the end. This way we can move on with the presentation. Situation that requires survey. Typically, you normally will file this asbestos assessment report if a job requires a building department survey for any kind of work building department require. Prior to conducting the survey here, we think the CAI should review building records. And why we're saying that is we find a lot of times CAIs fill out a report and they basically said we didn't know this building had asbestos, or we didn't know there was a pipe chase. We didn't know there was vinyl flooring tiles somewhere. So we say take a look at the building records, and building records you might get it from the owner. Meaning, ask the owner, have we done tile work here? Meaning, I know in some buildings you will find that there's 5 layers of roofing material. You may find 5 layers of floor tiles. And generally, an investigator will say, I didn't expect it to have so much floor tiles, like so many layers. So we say, talk to this owner or whoever might be able to identify what might be present. And this is only a cursory survey. This isn't your actual survey, but it helps guide you in that process. Contact the building owner, determine the exact scope of work. Again, many times we have found that people say, we weren't sure what the scope of work was, or the owner didn't tell us what that scope of work was. If you don't know, ask the owner specifically for what is the scope of work? What do you expect to be done here, right? And I'm saying to you also, if the owner has to give it to you in writing, let him give it to you in writing to protect yourself. So many times we have CIs, and obviously we trust you that the owner would have told you the right thing. But CIs come and say, well, he or she told me it was the first floor. Then they were doing work in the basement. or they were doing something different to protect yourself, and we don't want to issue you a violation unnecessarily. It's unfair to you. So if you have to get something in writing from the owner saying this is the scope of work, get it, right? And then we know you can look at the PW1s, you can look at any filings they have with DOB to make sure that you are on the same page with what you fill out on the ACP spy form. Again, we're advising you to do this because we want to protect you also. Match the scope of work of the ACP5 with the scope of work. Again, if those things are available, please do it. You required, yes.
Can we comment at each section or?
No.
Wait till the end?
Wait till the end, if we can. We
Okay.
can hold it until the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can go back to the slide if you want.
Okay.
In that survey, it said determine the type and quantity of ACM present. So what we want you to do is when you do that assessment, to take a look around the building and again related to the scope of work. So when we go and do an inspection and an audit for any of your jobs, we actually look up the scope of work that you identified and we check that area. Similarly, here we're saying we don't expect you to do an assessment of the entire building if it's work only in the basement. It's only for that work area. We say do an assessment of all the asbestos that are present in that work area. One thing you will see here is that, and we find that many investigators say, well, it was behind the wall, right? And that's a typical excuse. And the owner told us, don't break the wall. Well, if he tells you don't break the wall and he hired you to tell if there's asbestos there, you have to break the wall, right? Otherwise, you can't take the job. It's as simple as that, right? This will require destructive testing. You cannot come and say, well, yeah, he told me don't break the wall, so I'm going to assume asbestos was behind the wall, just, by saying I'm going to assume everything is asbestos. We want you to, if you have to open the wall to make that determination, or if there's records that say the pipe chase runs in this location, right? And you can make an assessment that may have 10 feet of pipe TSI or something in there, then do that. Be persistent, maybe be hidden behind drop ceilings or partitions. Determine condition of all suspected ACM. Again, here the regulations and our regs say determine the condition, right? And condition here could mean friable. Is it intact? Is it dropping off the pipe? This would go in your report. Identify homogeneous areas of suspected ACM. And here, just for clarification, homogeneous areas means from our perspective is by color, texture, time it was installed. So if it was installed and you could tell, it looks different. Same ceiling, but two different colors of ceiling tiles, or some has holes in it, some don't. It is not homogeneous. So we are saying identify homogeneous areas and then sample accordingly. Assume it's ACM if it's not sampled. Again, there's guidance that says what could you assume as being asbestos or what you don't have to assume is asbestos. For example, glass. Then you need to identify glass. Rubber, for example. Fiberglass. If it's pink or yellow and it's an insulation, the general guidance is most likely it's going to be fiberglass. And you should, based on your experience, should be able to tell it's fiberglass. And the reference here is 40 CFR 763.86. So that's in the regulations, and our reg specifically says you should refer to this guidance document. Is it present in buildings? Again, some more references here. EPA references. ACM is identified in 3 types: troubled or spray-on, TSI, thermal surfacing insulation, and other miscellaneous types. And we have some examples here. For example, floor tiles. TSI would be on pipes, boilers, and surfacing material. Spray or trouble on, determine the location of all the material. Here we say you need to visually observe the material. One of the problems we have with some of these ACP5 reports is there's a lot of assumption that everything is asbestos. And we put this in red here, this part that says must be visually observed. because we want to make sure that you see that material. So many times we have found that CAIs say everything is asbestos. They just assume the entire building is asbestos. I'm serious. We get a lot of fives where, and what happens is, it only says assumed asbestos, and then the owner takes this 5 and run with it saying, we could do a demolition, right? But it's you really, you're not doing you're doing the owner a disservice by saying, I'm going to assume everything is asbestos. Then he didn't have to hire you, right? Your job would have been to do a thorough inspection where you actually see asbestos. So again, there's that position where it was behind the wall. I'm just going to assume everything is behind the wall, and sometimes there's nothing behind the wall, right? That doesn't help the owner. Quantify the ACM, and here you need to say it's 10 square feet, 25 linear feet. Collect core samples to be analyzed, and we specify core samples here because, as I mentioned to you, you will see floor tiles. Typically, when you see floor tiles in a lot of older buildings, they just kept putting them on. Roofing material, a lot of times, if you're lazy, where a contractor will be like, I'm not going to take the roof off, I'm going to put a new one on. And then I tell the owner, it's insulation, it's going to keep the house warm, right? So they have like 10 layers of roofing material. Core sample means you go all the way down to the substrate. Assume material to contain asbestos if samples are not collected. Again, if you see suspect material, and there's whole guidance on what is suspect material, then assume it's asbestos. Err on the side of caution is what we say. Examples of surfacing material here, and then you see some examples here. TSI. So examples of TSI will be what you find on pipe, on piping, heating pipes, boiler insulation. Determine the condition again. In your report, you are required to say what is the condition of this material. Why is that important to you? I'll tell you what, sometimes we go to a demolition job site, and here the owner didn't file the ACP5 yet, or he may or may not have filed the 5, but during that demolition, and the owner unknowingly hired a demolition contractor who starts breaking down the walls, there's pipes in a pipe chase that is in bad condition that starts falling apart when the demolition is taking place. So now ACM gets disturbed because it's all over the ground. It was not in a good condition. So if you identify that, it helps again protect you and protect the owner in some way, because you had identified this material as being damaged, falling apart. It's on the ground, it's loose. Take bulk samples as necessary. Again, you can't go wrong taking bulk samples. If samples, and again, we're going to assume it's asbestos here. Other asbestos containing material, document the presence and locations of the material. Again, you need to specifically say where you took samples from. And in the EPA guidance, it says you need to have these locations uniquely identified so that there's no way that somebody could misconstrue where the samples were taken from. Examples again here, you see roofing material, mastic. Surfacing materials divide homogeneous areas into 9 equal parts. So here when we say this is based on the guidance document, if you are not sure, what you would want to do is have some basic scientific method to ensure you sample appropriately. So for example here, the general guidance is take 9 samples, right? One of the things why the EPA went down to say take 3 samples, 5 samples, 7 samples here, that's 3, 5, 7. Guidance is basically if cost is an issue, then you may want to take the minimum number of samples. The only thing is based from our experience, and I'm saying DEP experience with our staff in the field, if I'm doing roofing material, for example, roofing material or any sort of patching materials, trouble-on material, that material isn't in itself homogeneous. So you may get 1 hit here, and you took 9 samples, only 8 negative, 1 positive. So you want to be able to take samples that is representative. Don't say I'm going to try to go with the minimum samples. 3 samples for 1,000 square feet area. If you think about it really for roofing material, that's not going to cut it, right? Because roofing material, flashing, for example, we find many times out of a roof that said it was positive for asbestos, we may take 10 samples, I'll get 5 that is a hit, right? And sometimes as a CI, you may take 3 samples and those 3 samples came out negative because you went with a minimum. Then we go out and we take samples. I'm going to take 10 samples at least for roofing material because I know for a fact it's not homogeneous. And then I get, 2 or 3 positive. So if you're doing roofing, if you're doing this kind of stuff here for sampling, try and don't go with a minimum because of those facts I told you just now. Try and do some more. So again, the 9, you want to divide this area into 9 equal parts, and we have a slide coming up with that. This would be something like this here. So here, what this is saying is, this is only a schematic. I have a whole bunch of different homogeneous areas. Raj, I know you just you want to go ahead and this is Raj Rajesha, one of my supervisors. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, this is the grid system, and this makes sense. But a lot of times you go out in the field, and we'll talk to the bill owner. Yeah, the guy came and he took a sample from over there, and you have, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet of fireproofing material. And one of the reasons for using this grid system is because over the years, the building owner might have done work, either legally or illegally, put on new fireproofing material, but there's still existing one there, in this area over here, and that area, and that area over there. So if you use this grid system and you take sample randomly, based on the 357 rule, your chances of getting one of those areas is very high. And to just come and say, okay, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. And like Charles was saying, even roofing material, I would use a grid system with a roofing material because the owner might patch over there and patch over there over the years. And he got material here, over there. If you use that grid system, your chances of hitting one of those spots increases. Right? Core samples. Right? Because multiple layers. The old fireproofing might still be there. If you just take off a little piece, you get a new one. The work starts, we show up, we got everything on the floor, we collected bulk samples, it's positive. Right? A lot of times you've seen that. So you want to make sure you utilize this grid system where in your mind, now we don't expect you to get a measuring tape and measure and divide it equally. In your mind, divide the area into.
You could have an irregular area, for example.
Yeah, this is an irregular area. Divide it up, and you try to take your samples in the middle of the squares. So you get that system going, and it's consistent, and you should be good. All right.
So the reason why they have these numbers here, and you see these numbers like this here, this is basically to confuse the analyst. The intent, no, I'm serious. The intent, why they have these numbers like if you're wondering, the intent is to confuse the analyst in the sense that if they had it in sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, generally they're saying the analyst might assume in his head, psychologically, I'm like, if number 1 was positive and they were taken in order, number 2 might be positive, right? So, and as you know, with asbestos bulk sampling, there's a lot of, what's that word? Where I would assume in my head, if this is positive, the next one's going to be positive, and a lot of subjectivity in the analytical process, right? The difference between 1% and 1.1% isn't that much. So what they do is the EPA come with this and saying, let's mix these numbers up. So when you sample, don't do it in any particular order, so that the people in the lab cannot, or well, hopefully wouldn't say the one next to the next one is positive. That's the intent. Sampling thermal insulation here, again, they have a guidance here, 3 samples. for TSI, those are minimum. The thing with TSI, most of the times we know for sure, almost 100% is going to be a positive, right? That's most people's take. Those things are easy to identify. If you have enough experience in the business, when we see pipe insulation, we could tell it's going to be positive. So we say take 3 samples, patch areas 1 sample, for elbows, T's at least 2 samples, or in a manner sufficient to determine. And you will see that word used in most guidance documents and regulations. It's basically saying you need to use your experience, skills, knowledge, ability, whatever, to take the right amount of samples. Again, you will see here, we're saying you should visually see the material. Sampling other miscellaneous material, at least 2 samples or in a manner sufficient to determine. And as you see here in this case, sometimes we will find you have to take off some outer covering. For example, siding is a good one. We see a lot of times there's aluminum siding. The investigator goes, looks at the aluminum and runs with aluminum. You have to take a look inside. And I know that sounds basic to you, but from our experience, a lot of people look at the outside material, that first coat, that first layer. And this could happen sometimes. If you have floor tiles and it's all messed up, one of the things I may want to do is I'm going to put a layer of flooring, plywood to even it up. And then somebody starts demolition and everything becomes exposed, right? This is why sometimes talking to that homeowner might be helpful. Because in this case, if this is the VAT here and I have a sheet of plywood there, you're going to come with negative, right? That's understandable in this case that you will come with it, but we're saying you need to be very thorough in your investigation. Basic requirements for a field survey report. That report that you prepare, it should include the condition of the work area during the time of investigation. Have a blueprint, diagrams, written description of the building. So it requires work. You will have to take the time, and I can tell you from my personal experience doing audits, I've gone to many audits, office audits, and while I'm there, the CI is writing up the building description where he inspected 1 year ago, right? It happens. You need to do this right away, and it needs to be that detailed. Quantification of the ACM present. The name, signature of anyone who collected bulk samples. This is another issue we have. We have people who are investigators who have state investigators working with them that isn't recorded, it's not properly logged. Chain of custody for all bulk samples. A clear and defined scope of work. Again, we are saying to you, make sure and get that scope of work. Any assumed material should be clearly identified. Investigation specific information such as building address, building owner's information. So the blueprint, diagram, drawing, written description, you want to be able to have some nice description so that if I went to that location, I could look at your drawing and say, the investigator took samples at this location, and that location. We have had many instances where we have to go and show the CAI, this is where we sampled. The CAI have no clue where he or she sampled. So if you have that description, you have that drawing, and we came to you, you could say, look, this is where I sampled, right? It makes it easier for everyone. It's for your protection also. Again, mind you, our intent here is to help you do the job better or to understand what we look for or what is expected of you. Include the location quality of any areas that were assumed to have ACM. The chain of custody, and this chain of custody requirement is a basic requirement that is used not just for asbestos investigation, in any criminal court, anything. When you have a chain of custody, you should have some basic information. Name and address, date and time samples were collected, extremely important. Why? Because sometimes we may see a chain of custody that has a different time to the time you did the investigation, right? We check for all those things when we do our audits. So if those things don't match up, there's a problem. And if you do these things while you're doing the sampling, it would make it a lot easier. The printed name and signature of each person collecting bulk samples, location where the samples were collected, a unique identification number. We do see chain of custody come up where the numbers, you could tell they were totally messed up, incorrect. Maybe somebody gets those things afterwards. So you want to make sure you have any sampling procedure that you're using in any kind of chain of custody will have a unique identification number. That's standard practice. Description of the samples, the date and time the bulk samples were relinquished for analysis. Again, these things, when we do an audit, we will check those things. So you need to make sure that these things are in sync with what you did when you were out in the field. The printed name and signatures of each person relinquishing the samples. If someone took it to the lab and it wasn't you, that person's name should be on it also. Record keeping requirements. The CI required to maintain a permanent record, and you know that record is for at least 30 years. The compiling of records shall be done prior to the preparation of an ACP 5 or 7. A survey report shall be prepared at the conclusion of the survey hazard. It should, again, include the premises, location, and so on. Indicate, the CI is required to indicate all instances in which work was performed by a non-certified. Again, if you have a state person, have your records for 30 years. These records should be available during the normal course of the DEP inspection. So if we show up at your location and you're there, they should be available. Many times CI says we try to be reasonable and we tell you we're going to come to your location when it's convenient to you. We don't have to do that. We do it as a courtesy because we know you all are busy, just like we are busy, and we tell you when it's convenient for you, and then you give us 2 weeks, and we try to set up something in 2 weeks, right? And I've gone to places where, and I'll give you an example. I've told a guy, he said 2 weeks, and he's like, no, I need more than 2 weeks, right? And I'm in my head thinking all sorts of stuff that I shouldn't think. He asked for another 2 weeks. I go there, and while I'm sitting there, the guy is still writing up, and he's like, listen, I didn't get a chance to finish writing up all of these reports. He's telling me that, right? Don't make it that difficult for yourself when we do an audit. And I say, I give the guy time. It didn't help him because he never had anything written up, right?
You have to go through the process.
Right? You know, but I'm saying to you, don't think that we don't, when we do our audits again, we try our best to give you the benefit of the doubt. We try to work with you. We don't, try to squeeze you and be like, I'm showing up at your place now in this, I'm outside here. We do that for ACP 5, ACP 7 inspections. For ACP 5, we understand the nature of what you do, and your job is a field job just like ours. Ram, you want to go into the audits?
Okay.
This is Ram Mohan. He's one of my supervisors also.
So you all know that you might have gone through audits, field, office, time to time you hear modifications, amended ACP 5. We randomly pick based on number of filings. If you're a high filer, there's a chance that you're going to get audited multiple times within a year. That's a possibility. And then based on a field audits, complaints that we go to, pretty much a lot of the complaints we go to all construction sites, definitely an ACP 5 involved. So we look for, there's a field audit right there. All right, so any issues, missed material, that's going to add up. That's going to be a trigger point. So it's going to go on, scheduling. So those are the bases. Non-compliance, definitely we issue summons. We require post sample orders. Even though the DOB has issued work permits, that supersedes, we issue stop work order, everything stops. We can even go to the site as you file ACP 5. We can go to the site and do a field inspection, put a stop to all the permit work until we get everything is addressed at the site based on the scope of work, right? So scope of work is very key. It's better to understand. If I'm me, I would get the preliminary permit. I mean, a permit application, I will go through it. Even if it's a drawing, I would like to get a drawing before I go do my survey. That's the way I would do if I'm a CII. I would not do if I don't know the clear scope of work. A lot of times scope expands too.
What's difficult about that is that the expediter can't create a PW1 without our control number.
Actually, they can.
They can.
Well, we've now convinced that they can do a dummy one
Right.
and get us the PW1, and then we then stack our HP5. But at the beginning, it was the chicken and the egg.
No, they can always do that.
Well, try to explain that to some of the experts.
No.
I'm an
No.
expediter.
Basically,
I
you should be,
always found a way.
wait. You should be able to get some scope of work in writing from the owner, just to protect yourself.
I want to see the
Okay,
PW1.
fine, okay, let's go on.
I think that's about it based on audit, how we do. These are some point systems we have.
Let's not get, go ahead.
As you see, most serious violations, it's on the 5 points. 101E, making false statement. You walk into a building and floor tiles looking at you 9 by 9. The CI didn't mention anything. The building is going for full demolition, right? That's 5 points, right? 16A3, you missed material, you didn't take enough samples. 1 sample of plaster, 1 sample of PSI. Those are all 16A3, and that's one of the serious violations. And then fail to make records available. We make inspections, make appointments. We don't have to make appointments. Under your normal work hours, we can show up your office, we can look for records. As a courtesy, we make appointments and work with you, because as you said, you all feel people, we try to make appointments. A lot of times I've seen investigators, clericals trying to make up records. That's not going to work, because you don't know which record we're going to be looking for, right? So if records are not available, that's a serious one. 4 points, the next level, fail to maintain a permanent record. You go there, there's no records, right? Fail to indicate. You have instances where you have people assisted you in the survey, but there is no mention, but we catch it in the chain of custody. Somebody did the sampling, but that's not you. It's not there. It should be in the survey record. 3 points. People have, names, whoever is collected bulk samples, names missing, whoever sampled it, it's not there. It's not properly filled. That's why it's a key. If I'm a CI, I'll be walking with my survey report, blank report, every site. I'll fill as I do the survey. As I fill as I collect my samples. That's the best practice. When you come back, you can fill all of that digitally or whatever you want to do it, right? 2 points. Failed to create complete survey report. Components of the survey report missing. Blueprints not there, locations not there, sample numbers not there, quantification is not there. Those are 2 points. Failed to maintain a blueprint. That's again the same thing. It's part of the record keeping requirements. So these are the points. These are some points. There are other points of less serious violations also included, carry some points.
Again, so we maintain a point system here to determine what hearings for the CIs in terms of any suspension hearings. So this is some of the things that we look for. So again, based on the point system here, we will schedule a hearing for whether it's a suspension or revocation. Mind you, even though we have this system, if for some reason we were to go to a location and I walk into that location and there's asbestos looking at me everywhere, it is possible we may look at it as being something what we refer to as egregious type situation, and we'd probably say this CAI couldn't have even come to this location, and it is possible that we bring you in for a hearing. Not a DCB, but here is a suspension or revocation hearing, because there is something drastically wrong there, right? And it happens many times. We go to job sites where the CI signed off clean bill of health, and there's asbestos there that there is no way that you could have missed it. I'm talking pipe insulation, boiler insulation, and everything else. That's the end of this very simple, basic presentation here. You have anything?
No, so basically, downside to non-sampling is going to cost a lot of money, right? We have seen a lot of single-family owners paying tens of thousands of dollars for fine.